The evening lights of downtown Chicago reflected on the windows of one of the most elegant restaurants in the city when Emily Johnson stopped at the entrance, took a slow breath, and pushed the heavy glass door. Inside, crystal chandeliers cast golden light over perfectly arranged tables with silver cutlery and soft white linens. The air smelled of fresh basil and melted butter, making the place feel luxurious, intimidating, and very far from the world Emily belonged to. She had not come for luxury. In her small purse were 5 wrinkled dollar bills, the last of her food money for the week. She was 24 years old, studying for her teaching degree while juggling 2 part-time jobs, barely managing rent, textbooks, and bus fares. She could not afford dinner in a place like this, but her best friend had insisted that this blind date was too good to miss. Emily did not have the courage to admit that she did not have enough money to buy anything more than water. The maitre d' greeted her politely, though his subtle glance made it clear he recognized the insecurity behind her attempt at confidence. Emily asked for the reservation under Johnson and was led to a small table by the window, perfect for a romantic evening but painfully large for someone sitting alone. She smoothed the sleeves of the beige sweater she wore, a piece that had belonged to her mother and was saved only for special occasions. Her black pants came from a thrift store, but she hoped no one would notice. Minutes passed. Emily checked her phone again. No message, no missed call. 20 minutes, then 30. She became hyper-aware of the room around her. Clinking glasses, low laughter, couples sharing appetizers she could not afford. Every time she glanced toward the entrance, she felt her cheeks warm with embarrassment. The waiter approached for the second time, offering appetizers, but she kept her voice steady while ordering only ice water, hoping he would stop asking. On the other side of the dining room, Jonathan Miller sat across from an investor who seemed determined to criticize everything about him. Jonathan was a well-known business owner in the technology sector and was used to business meetings, but this one was different. The investor repeated that Jonathan's priorities were weak, that a single father could never grow a powerful company. Jonathan listened with a controlled expression, though behind it simmered irritation. He believed deeply that a man's success meant nothing if it cost him the chance to be a present father. While the investor spoke with growing arrogance, Jonathan found his attention drifting again to the young woman by the window. He had noticed her when she arrived, adjusting her hair and gathering her courage before sitting down. Now, nearly an hour later, her date had still not appeared. She sat straight, dignified, her eyes occasionally scanning the room, trying not to show the pain building beneath her calm expression. Jonathan recognized that feeling. He had experienced moments in his life where everything around him reminded him he did not belong, and yet he had forced himself to remain proud. Emily kept waiting, but when nearly a full hour passed, she could no longer pretend. She had been stood up. No apology, no text message, not even a simple excuse, just silence. Her stomach tightened, both from hunger and humiliation. She stood, ready to leave quietly before anyone could notice her failure and pity her. But as she turned, she almost bumped into the waiter arriving with a covered plate. He smiled warmly and told her that her dinner had arrived. Confused, Emily tried to explain that she had ordered nothing. The waiter lowered his voice and gestured discreetly toward another table. A gentleman had taken care of everything. Emily followed the direction of the waiter's eyes and saw the man sitting across the dining room, watching her with a discreet but kind expression before returning to his conversation. She felt a wave of emotion she could not control: embarrassment, gratitude, disbelief. She considered refusing out of pride, but her empty stomach and the sincerity she sensed in the gesture forced her to pause. After a moment of hesitation, she sat down again, her eyes meeting his briefly in silent thanks. The man nodded respectfully and looked away, giving her space. She lifted the silver cover and found a simple, beautifully prepared plate, elegant but not extravagant. She had not tasted anything yet, but already something inside her had changed. For the first time that night, Emily did not feel alone.
Emily took a small bite, and although the food was delicious, she could barely taste it. Her mind was racing, trying to make sense of what had just happened. She glanced again toward the man who had paid for her dinner. He was engaged in conversation, but not with the satisfaction of someone showing off. There was no arrogance, no expectation, just quiet composure. It only deepened her curiosity about who he was and why he had chosen to help a stranger. Meanwhile, at Jonathan Miller's table, the investor's tone had grown louder and more aggressive. He accused Jonathan of letting sentiment and personal responsibility weaken his professional drive. He questioned how Jonathan expected to compete with the best in the market while wasting time, as he put it, playing the role of devoted father. Jonathan's jaw tightened, but he remained composed. He had heard these judgments before. Some people believed success required sacrificing everything else. He simply did not agree. As the investor continued, Jonathan's eyes shifted again toward Emily. She was now eating in silence, her posture straight, her expression both relieved and wounded. Jonathan recognized in her something more than embarrassment. He saw the weight of someone who had worked hard for everything and still felt judged by the world around her. He understood dignity forged in difficulty. It was a language people like the investor at his table had never learned. Emily finished her meal slowly, still struggling with the idea of accepting it. She asked for the check, intending at least to pay for the water, but the waiter returned with a gentle smile and told her that everything had already been taken care of, including the tip. She looked toward the man again, only to find him gathering his documents and preparing to leave. Without thinking, she stood up, her instincts pulling her forward before doubt could stop her. She walked across the dining room, heart pounding, and stopped at his cable. Jonathan stood politely when she introduced herself and thanked him. Up close, he seemed even more grounded than she had imagined, with a tired warmth in his eyes. When she asked him why he had done something so generous for someone he did not know, he paused before answering. His voice softened as he told her about an evening 2 years earlier when his young daughter had witnessed a woman unable to pay for her children's meal. Jonathan had stepped in, and later his daughter had asked if helping someone in need was what fathers were supposed to do. He had answered yes, and that memory had remained with him. It shaped the man he chose to be. Emily listened, and something inside her shifted. She had been alone for so long, carrying burdens quietly, rarely meeting anyone who believed that kindness was not something naive or weak. Jonathan's story touched her in ways she could not express. She thanked him again, but before she could leave, he surprised her with an offer. He asked her to allow him the chance to take her to dinner properly one day, somewhere they could actually talk without the strain of humiliation or awkward timing. Emily felt her cheeks warm and tried to protest, thinking he felt obligated. But he corrected her gently, saying that he was asking out of interest, not duty. He admired the strength she had shown in a situation that would have broken many people. Her courage reminded him that compassion still mattered. As they spoke, the investor waited impatiently, clearly offended that Jonathan was wasting his time speaking to someone he considered unimportant. When Jonathan returned to the table, the investor accused him of lacking focus, of caring about the wrong things. His answer was quiet but firm. He would rather fail while staying true to his values than succeed by abandoning what mattered. The investor's face turned red with outrage. He declared that he would pull his interest and take his money elsewhere. Jonathan nodded calmly. He was prepared for that. He had learned that not every deal was worth the cost of compromising who he was. The investor stood and left angrily, leaving Jonathan alone in the booth. He sat for a moment, absorbing the consequences. His expansion plans would need to be reconsidered. His business team might even panic when they heard what he had done. But as he looked across the room and saw Emily stepping outside, he felt a sense of peace. Emily walked into the cool night air, and for the first time in a long while, she did not feel defeated. Something had changed. A stranger had seen her, truly seen her, and had extended kindness without wanting anything in return. She stood outside for a moment, breathing in the night, wondering what might happen next. Inside, Jonathan retrieved his coat and decided he did not regret anything. He had chosen dignity over financial gain and compassion over competition. He headed for the exit, unaware that the small decision he had made would alter both of their futures in ways neither of them could yet imagine.
Jonathan stepped out of the restaurant just a few moments after Emily, the cool night breeze brushing against his face. He spotted her standing by the corner, seemingly lost in thought, her purse held close to her body as if grounding herself. For a moment, he considered walking away and letting the evening end where it was, but something in the way she stared up at the city lights made him approach. Emily heard footsteps and turned, her eyes widening slightly when she recognized him. She thanked him again, awkwardly, unsure of what was appropriate. Jonathan smiled and told her it was not necessary. He simply hoped her night had turned out better than it had begun. There was a brief silence, not uncomfortable but heavy with the sense that something meaningful had passed between them. Then, before either could continue, Jonathan's phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen and sighed. The message was from his operations director, already demanding an explanation for why the investor had walked out so angrily. Emily noticed the fatigue in his eyes and hesitated before asking if he was all right. Jonathan did not share details, but his answer was honest. He had made a choice many people would not understand, and now he would have to face the consequences. Emily's gaze softened. She understood too well what it meant to have your decisions judged by others. They parted ways soon after, each heading alone in different directions. For Emily, the night felt like a turning point, though she didn't dare hope for anything more. For Jonathan, the quiet walk home gave him too much time to think. His company was already stretched thin. Losing the investment could put everything at risk. But as he replayed the investor's cold dismissal of human decency, he remained certain he had chosen correctly. The next morning, Emily returned to her routine, an early shift at a small bookstore, followed by evening hours at a tutoring center. Her world was practical, quiet, and relentless. She pushed through her day, but the memory of the previous night lingered. A stranger had treated her with more respect and generosity than most people who had known her longer. It was unsettling in the best possible way. But Jonathan's day, however, began with confrontation. His management team gathered in a conference room overlooking the Chicago skyline, their expressions tense. They had heard the news and were already calculating losses. Jonathan listened in silence as they laid out projections, warning that production expansions would need to be halted, marketing budgets reduced, and staff hiring frozen. Some went further, questioning whether Jonathan's personal responsibilities were compromising the company's future. It was the same argument the investor had made, now echoed inside his own walls. He responded calmly but firmly. He reminded them that the company was built on values that mattered, that a leader was not made stronger by abandoning compassion. Some members nodded, others doubted him, and one even suggested bringing the investor back for negotiation. Jonathan refused. The discussion ended without resolution, casting a shadow over the rest of his day. Meanwhile, Emily's best friend insisted on knowing why she had not answered messages the night before. She finally confessed what had happened, expecting teasing. Instead, her friend stopped stunned and then demanded every detail. As Emily spoke, her friend's expression softened with genuine admiration. Emily realized, maybe for the first time, that accepting kindness did not diminish her. It reminded her that she still deserved good things. But while Jonathan and Emily were processing the night in very different spaces, fate continued to move them closer. Late that evening, just as Emily finished preparing a lesson plan, her phone lit up with an unknown number. She hesitated, then answered. On the other end, Jonathan's voice was steady but carried the weight of the day. He apologized for calling unexpectedly and asked if she might be free one evening later that week. His tone made it clear that this was not obligation, not pity, not an attempt to impress. He simply wanted to talk again. Emily's heart skipped before she found her voice. She accepted. But life has a way of testing people the moment things begin to change. The next morning, Jonathan received news that a major contract had been delayed, leaving the company financially exposed. Departments were already anxious. and upper managers were pressing for changes that Jonathan believed violated the soul of everything he had worked for. He spent the afternoon in heated debates, facing pressure from colleagues who valued numbers over principles. For the first time in years, doubt crept in. What if everyone was right? What if placing integrity above profit was an irresponsibility? Emily faced her own setback. The university notified her that she needed to complete an extra tuition payment earlier than expected. Without it, her enrollment and her future degree would be in jeopardy. She ran numbers all evening searching for something to cut, but there was nowhere left to tighten. She was already living on the bare minimum. Both went to bed that night carrying burdens heavier than they could admit out loud. And yet, they were about to face the moment when everything would be pushed to the breaking point.
The evening of their planned dinner arrived, but neither Jonathan nor Emily began the day with the lightness they had hoped for. Emily woke early, exhausted from a night of restless sleep, still replaying the university's notice in her mind. She had already stretched every dollar as far as possible. She skipped lunch to save money, worked her entire afternoon shift on an empty stomach, and told herself she would figure out a solution tomorrow. She always had to figure out a solution tomorrow. Jonathan, meanwhile, walked into the office and felt the air change the moment he stepped through the door. His senior staff had called an emergency meeting. They presented new projections, new concerns, and quietly, the pressure for him to reconsider the values he defended. They needed stability. Investors needed confidence. The market needed results. And Jonathan, according to them, needed to be more pragmatic. Instead of arguing, he listened. When they finally finished, he spoke softly but decisively. If the company could not stand on the principles it was built on, then there was no point in leading it forward. The room fell silent. His message was clear. He would not change who he was. He left the building later that afternoon, carrying a weight few could see. The world might question him, but he refused to become the kind of leader who believed profit was more valuable than people. Still, as he walked toward the small restaurant where he and Emily had agreed to meet, he wondered if there was room in his life for anything other than constant responsibility. Emily arrived a few minutes early and stood outside, staring through the glass window. It was a modest diner, nothing like the elegant restaurant where they had first crossed paths. She liked that. It felt real, human, possible. But her nerves pressed heavily. She should be spending this evening working out how to pay her tuition. She should not be thinking about dinner with a man who had already lost more than she knew. Jonathan approached, and when she turned and saw him, something in both of them loosened. Their smiles were quiet but genuine. They sat and ordered simple meals, grilled chicken, vegetables, and coffee. For the first time, they talked freely, not as two strangers linked by circumstance, but as two people who understood that life was heavier for those who carried the weight alone. Emily admitted her struggles, although she softened the details, not wanting pity. Jonathan listened with the attention of someone who had learned to hear what was not spoken. Then he shared his own battles, the loss of investors, the criticism from colleagues, the fear that doing the right thing might cost him everything he had built. When he finished, Emily looked at him with a tenderness that startled them both. She told him something no colleague or investor had said, that courage meant more when it cost you something. The conversation strengthened something between them, but the world outside did not slow down. Jonathan's phone rang again, another urgent message from the company. Reluctantly, he stepped away to answer. Emily remained at the table, watching him through the window as he paced outside. She saw the exhaustion in the way he leaned against the brick wall, the weight of decisions that no one else could carry for him. And in that moment, she understood something. Kind people were often the ones fate tested the hardest. Jonathan returned and apologized. She waved off the concern. They continued their conversation, but the tension of real life followed them both. After dinner, Jonathan walked her to the bus stop. The night was cold, the city buzzing around them, but neither wanted to leave. They stood a moment in silence, then Jonathan said something unexpected. He told her that regardless of what the future held, meeting her had reminded him that doing good mattered. Emily felt tears rise and took a slow breath before answering. She told him that generosity had given her something she had not felt in a long time: hope. They parted with a quiet promise to see each other again, but neither of them knew how close the breaking point truly was. The next days brought changes neither could have predicted. Jonathan gathered his executive team and made a decision that shocked everyone. Instead of retreating or compromising his principles, he announced a new program. The company would redirect part of its development budget into a scholarship fund for students facing financial hardship. It was a risk, and everyone knew it, but Jonathan believed a company should succeed by lifting people, not stepping over them. When the program launched, it did not weaken the company. It strengthened it. Clients respected the integrity behind the choice. A new investor, one aligned with Jonathan's values, came forward, and slowly the pressure eased. 1 week later, Emily opened her email in the tutoring center office and froze. She reread the message twice before she could breathe. She had been awarded a scholarship that covered the tuition payment she could not afford. She pressed her hand to her mouth, eyes filling, unable to believe it. It took only a moment for her to realize where it had come from. That night, she arrived at Jonathan's home where his young daughter was drawing at the kitchen table. When she stepped through the doorway, Jonathan looked up with surprise, and she saw in his eyes the vulnerability of someone who had chosen to do the right thing, even when no one promised a reward. Emily walked across the room, stood in front of him, and simply said, "Thank you." Jonathan started to explain, but she shook her head. She understood. She saw him, not the CEO, not the businessman, but the father who wanted his daughter to grow up in a world where kindness was not a weakness. Years later, on their anniversary date, they would return to the place where everything had begun. Not the diner, but the elegant restaurant where Emily had once sat alone with $5 in her purse. At table 12, Jonathan would retell the story to his daughter, reminding her that a single moment of compassion had changed all of their lives. And he would say, as the family held hands over the table, that true wealth is never measured in profit, but in the lives we lift, the hearts we touch, and the good we refuse to stop believing in. If this story touched you, leave a comment and share it. Someone out there may need a reminder that kindness still changes the world, one stranger at a time.